Title card up, next Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission with Planning and Housing. Director Kelly Diekman sit at a curved dais. Technical error. No sound is recorded.
As an advisory commission, we welcome all comments regarding the proposed plan. Please direct your input to the commission. If the proceedings become lengthy, we may ask that comments be focused on new information not previously presented. You may speak only once on an agenda item. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker information card and present it to the recording secretary. We ask that you come to the microphone to speak so that all comments may be recorded. The order of the proceedings for each item on the agenda will be as follows. City staff will present the staff report regarding the agenda item. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of city staff. The applicant will be invited to make a statement regarding the request. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions. Once public comment is closed, city staff and the applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. The commission will discuss the application based on all presentations and any comments given and come to a recommendation for city council. The discussion may include further questions of city staff and the applicant for clarification. And with that, we'll move to the first item on the agenda, which is introduction of commission members.
Julie Winter.
Scott Huffman.
Cheryl Moss.
Mike Sullivan.
Matthew Voss.
Kyle Hosworth.
Jim Blickenstorff.
All right, and then we'll move on to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Move to item 4 on the agenda, approval of the minutes of May 20th, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the minutes of May 20th, 2026, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Now we'll open it up for public forum. If there's anyone from the audience that wishes to speak on an item that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity. Please come up and speak. Seeing none, we'll close public forum and move to item 6 on the agenda, rezone with master plan for the Bluffs at 4899 Everest Avenue.
Planner Justin Moore approaches
All right,
the staff
thank you
table.
very much. This request is from Friedrich Land Development Company, and it's to amend the master plan that applies to the property at 4899 Everest that you see right up there on the screen. This is part of the master plan for the Bluffs at Dankbar Farms subdivision, which was originally conceived of, given zoning, and platted here about 3 years ago.
Location and zoning map of the area shown.
The specific request tonight is for the area that you see shaded there, which is an unbuilt outlot piece of land in the Bluffs at Dankbar Farms, which is zoned medium density, suburban floating medium density FSR.
Area in middle of map is shaded for discussion.
This is an area that was included in the master plan for the Bluffs at Dankbar Farms. It always had a described concept of single family attached homes. However, it's sort of been a down the road type of thing. So to the west and to the north, the single family portion has begun to develop and grow. That is an area that is currently in a PRD, a planned residence district. You see it labeled there to the west. And so recently, staff has had discussions with the developer, and the developers come forward with this request. And what this is doing is it is amending the master plan, keeping the base zoning designation the same, keeping the anticipated number of units and density the same. However, it is changing the master plan to allow for a broader mixture of housing types, which include small apartments in this particular case. So I know the applicant provided a narrative in their description. What they are proposing calls for a mixture of single-family attached and detached homes along the west and south of the property there, and then a concept of some smaller apartment buildings to kind of the east-northeast side of the property up against Everest Avenue, which is currently being constructed. So that is the main request in the rezone, and that will update the master plan. Specifically, we do mention the number of units that are proposed, which stays the same from the original concept. And we do have a couple of conditions that we recommend, depending on which alternative is chosen. With alternative number 1, we do recommend to limit the number of apartment concept that we've seen from the developer that I'll pull up here in just a moment. And then also with that, designating that area in the northeast corner of the site as the only area that is suitable for apartments. So the concept that you see there
Map of developer's plan is shown.
is what the developer plans to construct. This was not in your packet. That was given to us here just before the meeting. So, but that is the general layout that the developer is proposing and that we've seen and that they're intending to develop the site as. So with the rezoning, after that, they would then come back and start going through the platting process and that sort of thing, which you would see come back through. So I think that covers it broadly. I can answer any questions specifically if you have any.
It appears the intent is that the future Everest goes all the way up to Cameron School. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep. That's under construction right now.
Yep.
Commission looks at plans on screen.
One question just about fire service in the apartment area. Is there enough for the hammerhead turn?
Yes, there is. Fire has looked at this concept. Actually, they've had an initial look at it, and they didn't have any major concerns with it, at least at this level.
So I'm trying to find the exact, I'll just kind of nimbly go around this quickly, but this is a higher density than what we would have expected to see if we were talking about single family attached was what the original intent was.
Yeah, it's a higher density housing type.
It's not a higher density. It's the same number of units. It's configured in different buildings.
Correct. Yep.
The unit count is not increased. It's just divided differently. So if you meant by density, the
Yes.
actual units on the lot, it's
Yeah.
not different.
The number of units is staying the same.
Your
as
per
it was
acre is the
originally
same.
proposed.
Your
Right.
volume per
Units,
acre.
yeah, the cap is the same.
Remember, I think it was maybe about 9 months ago, we were talking about another development in this area and talked about emergency response time, like fire response time. Talked about it was kind of before the city's budget season and talk about that. I guess, has there been any progress as far as, I know the relocation of the fire station, south part of Ames was done, but as far as the north service area, I guess, is there any update on that or any changes as far as that goes?
I mean, council ended up approving that project and talked about what it meant to start planning for that firehouse in North Ames. There's currently nothing in the budget for it. We're in discussions with the developer just to the east across GW Carver for the property that was the Borgmeyer farm to be known as the Greenbrier project. We're going to reserve space in that project for a firehouse. It's not a full station, but for emergency service personnel to be in North Ames. So that's on track, but a budget to actually construct something doesn't exist yet.
I'm going to go back to Julie's question. Are we sure that the number of units is the same? I'm just kind of counting, and I think just looking at the space here, you get about 55 single family homes on it, and now there's 71 units shown here on the map. Is there a drawing or a sketch that was provided from the previous zoning round that shows how this would have been laid out if it had been all single family detached?
So
They were not going to be detached. If I'm hearing you right, they weren't going to be detached. It was going to be a townhome development of attached housing clustered around private streets. So this is quite a bit different in the use of space than the original idea of using a lot of 3 to 5 unit attached buildings. So it wasn't the detached was precluded, but that you're right. You could not get to the number we're talking about if it was strictly detached homes. It had to have an element of townhomes in it, or primarily be townhomes to get to that number.
So the blue, if I'm reading this right, these are single family detached.
So I want to caution us right now. This is a concept that we have seen as staff. We've given some preliminary feedback about maybe adjustments to do this. You're not approving this project tonight. This is a version of a project that could be built if you approve the rezoning. The condition that we have on alternative 1 is to indicate that if there are apartments in the project, that they are shown as a distinguished element of the master plan that reflects this kind of a concept, so that it's clear that there's a transition of smaller scale housing to the south where the single family homes are. So we've all seen this. We've talked about it with the developer. This may or may not be the final configuration, but we're saying that if you do allow for apartments, they need to be identified discreetly within the master plan on this northeast edge of the site. So that there could be attached single family, there could be detached, there might be apartments with it. That's what they're asking for. And I think so this we don't have great guidance in our plan for RN3 on the edge of the city about the types of uses. So when you get to an FSRM zoning district, it theoretically allows for all 3 types of standard housing: small scale apartments, attached single family townhomes, and detached. We don't commonly see them mixed like this. So I don't have a great precedent for you. Usually a developer is looking at a chunk of land to do one thing or the other. The developer, I think, here is trying to attempt to transition from the lower density scale to the south to this, but then a siting of the apartments. Ultimately, that building would have to come back for a public hearing to make sure its scale and location is compatible with the single family or the attached single family that would be near it. It's a multi-step process, which I believe gets a little bit kind of messy for everyone, because there's multiple steps to finally get to what, even if this is the actual project, there's multiple steps to ever get to this.
But this starts the avalanche rolling.
Yeah, if you allow, yeah, absolutely. So if you allow the addition of an apartment building onto the site, then eventually you're going to see a plat that creates a lot, and eventually you're going to see a building design that goes with that lot.
So if I may, just one other question. With this concept, understand that the concept's not concrete in any way, but what would be the requirements for the developer in terms of garages in the blue spaces, and how would that fit from a compatibility perspective into the other developments in the Bluffs?
So a detached single family home has a requirement for 2 parking spaces that are located not in the front yard. So that would mean behind the front of the home. Every home that's been built in Ames has built a garage to meet that requirement, even though we don't technically require garages for any house in the city.
I guess what I mean is, I can't remember the exact date, but some time ago there was some change to how the garage language was set up, so that the front of the house had to be the front of the house and the garage had to be set back. And how were the rest of the homes in the area built? How were they zoned? What rules did they have to meet? And will it look right?
So we don't exactly have that rule. What we allow, so this is a little bit different. So you have, as Justin said, the part that's colored in brown there is its own, kind of like a PRD. And there's 2 distinct housing types within that PRD. So to the north, you have the very small lot Damani product, which is a very small lot, less than 5,000 square feet. It's essentially intended to be a 0 lot line home. In that PRD, we allowed garages. We allowed the whole house to have reduced setbacks to fit on the small lot. the garage still had to be at least 20 feet back from the sidewalk. That's the functional need for any separation of a car from a sidewalk. The Damani homes were permitted to have a porch element go in front of that. So a porch element could encroach into the 20-foot front yard. We would allow that anywhere in the city. We don't technically require anywhere but Somerset that a garage face is behind the front of the house. We just have a setback requirement that says it can't be any closer to the street. You could choose to build parts of the house in front of it, or you could make it equal or pull the actual living area behind the house. So in the South Brown area, there is no particular, those are basically standard or large lots, single family homes. There are no particular unique setback allowances in that area. And then the area immediately to the south on Everest is your standard FSRL zoning. It's a different subdivision, the Scenic Valley subdivision. So in FSRL, we encourage the home to be in front of the garage, but it's not required. A garage must be 25 feet back from the street. The house itself can be 20, plus a porch could go in front of that. So nowhere do we mandate it that it's behind, but we set the zoning up that you could choose to bring parts of the house in front of the garage. So in this case, if on those blue lots within FSRM, they would be treated the same as FSRL. They would have a basic house setback of basic garage setback of 25 feet and a house setback of 20.
Okay.
It was a lot of zoning to talk about.
One other follow-up, and then I'll be quiet.
Very good.
Again, this is a concept, so you can't say for sure, but let's think worst case. Is there the possibility of zero lot lines being allowed here in the blue areas? Are we thinking about what other concessions might be thought about going forward? Again, if this first step gets approved, what other negotiations, what other concessions might be something that should be considered tonight?
There probably isn't anything you need to consider tonight, because the steps after the zoning. So if somebody asks for changed setbacks, they need a rezoning again to a PUD. If you do attached single family that meets zoning and you're not asking for any setback reductions, you would see that in the platting process, where you would see the lots get narrower and you'd look at the density and you'd be able to look at the street pattern of how the lots are proposed with the preliminary plat. So if it was truly a really compact, unique development, you'd be back with a PUD that shows you the house designs, proposed setbacks. It'd be like the Damani project, where they have to show you everything up front. If it's just going to conform to standards, it would be the platting process, where you would see lot sizes. So at this level, you're not, normally you wouldn't even see something like this that's delineated with dimensions and all of this stuff. You would see kind of a more generalized unit distribution, maybe.
Right. I guess my question comes from a perspective of slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
There was a plan. Now we have a new plan. What's the next plan? Where is the line in terms of concessions to the builder to make the project affordable and profitable? And where is the balance for the community to make it acceptable and consistent with their surrounding architecture?
And those are all questions that belong in the conversation. And that's where I was trying originally to say RN3 doesn't really guide when should you allow 12 apartments or 48 apartments in combination with other things. So that's, you're right on the track of what is important to discuss. I just don't have good policy guidance for you at this point with this level of request to say that it is or isn't consistent with something. So we recommended that it was possible to be done. We were really hanging our hat on that the transition to the south can be done with a street and single family homes. So single family homes would be up against other single family homes. But you're right, to the north, that wouldn't necessarily be true for the northeast corner of the site. And then across the street, you're going to see the 2-story assisted living facility on a very large site. So it has a little bit different feel too, with larger front yards and spacing of things.
Right.
And I would say the applicant should probably talk to many of those points that you brought up instead of staff, since they could probably answer that from their perspective.
What's the number of story or height restriction on the zoning that we have there? Either the FSRM or the RN3, whatever applies there.
So FSRM would theoretically allow for a 50-foot height limit, but what usually gets people is you can only have 12 units in a building.
Yep.
That's pretty much always it could be a 3-story building, but typically it's a 2-story building.
Yep.
So the design that you saw up there is
That was
two-story
proposing
building.
6s
Yeah.
stacked. Yep.
So there is one exception of where someone actually did 4 stories and 50 feet because of a very unique site
Mhm.
that was amongst other high density housing, but otherwise that's not how someone's approached it.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions for city staff at this time? Oh, okay. Well, we would invite the applicant to come up if they would like to make a statement on this request.
Luke Jensen approaches the podium to address the commission.
Good evening. My name is Luke Jensen. I represent the development team, Friedrich Land Development. This property has always been something that we were going to get to as we took our focus really on the single family to the south, initiated the Damani project to the north. As you guys are familiar, the Cedarhurst project, the Dover project immediately to the east of this should be breaking ground this summer, and then the commercial area to the north. So tonight we're back to kind of the center of the project, and have been working with staff on that concept. We admittedly have a ways to go with that concept, but it was important for us to get the apartments out in front as an allowable use so we could complete our concepting and our design work with this. As you guys also know, the neighborhood has, by and large, a wide variety of housing types. We've got executive level ridge lots on the far south and southwest. We've got entry level new construction type homes along Polo. We have age targeted housing with the Damani project. We've also got the senior living facility. So we have a really broad set of housing. And this middle area, we think it suits well for attached housing. Along the cul-de-sac area would be some detached housing, and then the multifamily. And that multifamily could also be condo. So there is ownership options, there is for rent options. And that just goes to our entire vision with this project to take the 107 acres that are at the Bluffs and have a number of different types of housing. And today's request for the apartments fits into that. Just a side note on housing choices, we are seeing a host of people that are choosing to rent, that they find that to be a more economical way for them to live, provide more flexibility for their lifestyle. And so as we set into this, that's an objective that we have, is to try to meet the housing needs of a growing community. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Do you know what the your last statement intrigues me a little bit. Your comment about people choosing to rent. Do you know what the apartment rental percentage is in Ames currently?
I don't know the exact percentage. I've heard estimates of about 50%.
It's like, I believe in our comp plan, it's about 60-40, 60%. In measuring all units in the city, it's about 60% rental and about 40% ownership.
Okay. I'm sorry, I might have said the question wrong. Do you know how many of the existing apartments in Ames are currently rented out and how many are vacant?
Oh, the occupancy for the community?
Yes, sorry.
There you go.
Different questions.
Yes, very different
Yeah.
question. Sorry.
They're not 60%.
There's a group of property owners in town that do kind of an annual survey. Usually it comes out in August, September, after the majority of the students are back. At last report, I think it was in the 5% vacancy.
Okay.
95% or so occupancy.
Okay. Thank you.
If there's no other questions, supportive of option one with the conditions that staff outlined. And again, this will come back to you guys with the follow-up of the site plan review and all the other plotting things that we have to do there. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, and this time, if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to come and speak on this agenda item, we open public comment. Seeing none, close the public comment. Does city staff any concluding remarks on this matter?
I think it's kind of in the vein of what we're really talking about, but with your question, Kyle, I'll just kind of reframe that. So I don't think staff would say there is not a need for apartments in the city. We're not saying that at all. I think this type of site comes back to the questions of, in the comp plan, what's the appropriate context for multiple types of housing. So other parts of the city, we've said, absolutely, we want high density. We need to generate higher density housing, more rental options. So in this case, it's a different question of can the use be accommodated? Is it appropriately sited, rather than do we need it, and what's necessarily the density? It's really that context sensitive question, and that's what you're looking at for this master plan proposal.
All right. At this time, is there any discussion or further questions of city staff with the applicant?
I'll just I don't think I had a question, but I just have to say I loved this development when it came out, and seeing this now, I just really was set on the idea of single family attached, I guess. I guess I understand that the density isn't changing, so there's that to consider, but kind of just thinking about what Kelly just said about the proper, it's not just can the site accommodate it, but is it properly placed according to the comp plan? And I'm not trying to sway anyone, but just kind of, I feel like I would rather see this cited as something that lays out the plans a little bit more, and something that maybe could be considered as owner-occupied options. That's just my thought, where we are approving apartments left and right in town. And my thought is kind of to maybe go nay on this one. But that's just my thought. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to how they're leaning or what they think.
Would you feel different if it were condos? I know condos in some
Well,
cities are becoming like younger people are buying into condos.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically it could, but when we're talking this level, what was it, 70 something units? So divide, like a fourplex is a reason. I don't know, or I guess maybe I kind of see this as like just a great transitional owner occupied option where you have, yeah, if it's a condo, but if it's like a one floor opportunity, you know, like a ranch style situation that's going to accommodate a certain type of person who maybe, I mean, no ADA units really in there. There's a lot of, I don't know. What do others think?
I have to agree with you. Would it be possible for you to go back to the zoning location and zoning map just for a second? As I just want to be sure I'm clear about something. That one. Okay, so to the east, that's essentially apartments. It's short-term, long-term care for assisted living and some independent living is our call. To the north of that space in the CGS is a gas station or convenience store.
Okay.
It looks to me like 50% of the space of the development now is apartments or multifamily. And I agree with you. This seems like it's good real estate for single family, and that's how it was presented years ago. And I feel like there already have been some modifications on the east side, or there have been some approvals on the east side, which makes me think the balance is more towards single family than multifamily units.
That aren't a huge fan of it, but I think for the people that are looking to live in Ames long term, it's a great opportunity to actually be in a more neighborhood central area as opposed to apartment town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, I'll just say with anything like this, I mean, my first inclination is just that, allowing the flexibility is preferred, rather than, setting exactly what it's going to be, and that's just the way it is. I mean, in a case like this, I have a hard time saying that the apartment buildings, or thinking that the apartment buildings can't fit in, like what Scott was saying. I mean, since, it's likely they'll be 2-story, that seems reasonable. And, those, if designed well, we'll see down the line, those can fit in well with the surrounding context, in my view. And yeah, I agree with what you just said, Kyle, about, providing that variety of options to, kind of intermesh the very differing groups and names. I think there is real value in that too.
I could see both of those comments. I could appreciate that. I still look at it in terms of the opportunity cost of not building attached single family. Yeah, I guess it's just different ways to look at it, but I feel like I might just stick with it, folks. Very rarely do I vote nay, so.
No, if more options like this had existed when we first moved to Ames, that was more what we were looking for, than like the apartment town vibe, and it just wasn't really here. I feel like this could be a good opportunity for people to experience those neighborhoods a little bit more.
At the same time, so I live very close to Ada Hayden, and they have a beautiful development that's all attached, single family. We don't have very much of that, especially in beautiful places like this. That's one of the things that really intrigued me with this development, that you were still getting, again, we're not sacrificing density. We're talking about very similar density outputs here. We're just talking about which housing preference we want to see on that thing. I think housing stock wise, maybe staff could answer that, but I feel like there could be a big demand for attached single family. I don't know if that's called a duplex or a condo. I think it's a very attractive site to do that, but okay, I will. I think I've made my piece here, so we don't have to keep hammering it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that, I guess, to answer questions like that, I just kind of defer to the developers, and I mean, they, have the financial incentive to know what people are looking for. This can fit or does fit into the neighborhood context. I'm not sure. I don't trust myself to know exactly what everyone in Ames wants out of
Right.
Yeah, what they're looking for housing options, but
Any further discussion from anyone? Comments, questions? Do we have a motion?
I would move for alternative 1.
second.
We have a motion and a second for alternative 1. All in favor of alternative 1, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
No.
Okay, so that's
You got a 4-3.
4-3.
4-3 passing.
I think that passes, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Just need a majority.
Okay, so alternative 1 passes 4-3. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is zoning text amendment for data center definition and related updates to use tables.
Can you bring that map back up for me? Wasn't that just the zoning map you had up?
I have a land use map.
That'll work too.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was citywide, right?
Yeah.
I'll just use that.
20.
If you can just put that on the
Okay.
for me. Make sure East Industrial is on there. All right, so tonight we're talking about a clarification in the code related to data centers. If you read the report, the modern data center is not exactly what was envisioned in 2000 when we wrote the zoning ordinance. So a modern data center can be many things. I think the headlines, if you are a nerd and watch real estate news and other planning issues, are really focused on what we're calling the hyperscale data centers. So that would be your large campuses with generally 100 to 200,000 square foot, multiple building footprints. So that'd be like in Altoona, it'd be the Microsoft campus in West Des Moines. So those are very large projects that consume a lot of resources, have a lot of buildings.
Municipal zoning
They
map show.
grab a lot of headlines about the use of land for those things. There's another category, and there's smaller ones in this too, that we might call edge data centers or regional or local data centers. And they're generally sized under 100,000 square feet. And they're providing a different type of service. So hyperscaler is someone that's providing very large computing power for web hosting, AI, things that are just for very large scale and for national, international purposes. The smaller ones are generally targeted more towards a local or regional market to meet local or regional business needs. So a Google is not going to build a single 100,000 square foot building. Their needs are much greater, so that's why they build the large campuses. They're not serving one little area. So there's kind of two scales that we're talking about. And as we have been talking to different potential customers that want to locate in Ames, it became apparent that our zoning ordinance doesn't really address the issue, regardless of scale. It doesn't really address the issue well. So in our code, we have a phrase of a data processing center, which you would say, well, Kelly, that's exactly what we're talking about. I don't think so. So in our code, that's described as an office use, and I don't believe that in any way the rest of the description of office uses fit that description. And as I said, I think that term was from the 80s and it made sense in the 80s, but in the current world, that doesn't make sense. So I was kind of left as the planning director with, well, what would I call a data center? Where can it go? So I think if you were in a general industrial zone, I would allow it no matter what. Like anything you would classify a data center, basically that use is permitted in GI, so I wouldn't have to say exactly what it is. But as you go to other zoning districts in the city, I don't know if they're really permitted or not. So that led us to, we need to add this definition to our code. So what we're proposing is a fairly expansive definition. It would be inclusive of all types of data centers, small, large, whatever your purpose is, and it would also snag cryptocurrency, Bitcoin mining types of activities too. Now those are much different than a data center, but at some scale they're similar in terms of consumption of resources, at least electricity. So we would capture all of those types of things as a data center definition that we propose. And we're saying as staff that we would want to limit it to two parts of the city. So the colors get really tough behind you. Maybe the smaller one's a little bit better. So if you could zoom in on I-35, that probably help me a little bit. So on the east side of town, on the east side of I-35, the darker gray, that's called intensive industrial. And even though there's a lot of ag out east, that is all meant to become intensive industrial as the ownership transitions to people that actually want to construct industrial facilities. So that is a new area for expansion of industrial. It is intended to be large scale industrial uses. It is not meant for small scale types of operations. And in fact, Alliant is in the process of constructing a substation for the sole purpose of providing enough power to power any type of manufacturing use that could go there. And also a data center would be of that same type of need for power. So that east side of the city was very clearly meant for large industrial users. At the time, we probably didn't think it was data centers, but in terms of scale, it fits. But then as we go back west into the community, right up against I-35, is primarily what we call general industrial zoning. And general industrial is a lot more diverse than II. You can have a small auto body shop, or you could be 3M. So it really just captures the legacy industrial neighborhoods of the city that have really existed for over 50 years. And the range of uses is very diverse, like I just said. So again, if you're talking about scale, if you have a large property there, it would fit like 3M, Danfoss, any of those types of large warehouse buildings or large manufacturing. So we think, again, that's a zone where the type of structure would normally fit. The other benefit of these two zones is there very little residential zoning abutting them. So at times the data center use gets critiqued as whether it's a good compatible neighbor for potential noise generation. Again, the size, a lot of elements kind of related. Is this really something you want to be by residential, which is really the noise issue that comes from a lot of times from cooling systems as well as possibly from operations. So in terms of how our city is laid out, those east sides of the city, those two zoning districts, the use seems to fit in scale, and it's not proximate to sensitive users nearby where we need to address a lot of buffering or something that we wouldn't have otherwise anticipated. Our other zoning districts that we have for industrial uses are called planned industrial, and then the research park. Most of the planned industrial, Barilla is that, but most of the planned industrial and the research park zoning is in the same area down by the research park. There's a few other planned industrial pieces, but those zoning districts have a targeted different market. PI was not meant to be as expansive of uses as GI. I would say the idea was it was more office parky-ish, even though it allows warehouses and some other things. And then the research park zoning, the RI zoning, it's even more focused. It doesn't allow for warehouses. It allows for manufacturing, R&D, office, and then it has that hub area with some commercial activity. So again, its scale starts to refine down. So we are not proposing to allow any type of data centers in either of those two zoning districts because we don't think it fits the character and plan for those areas. And then if you start to look to the south, there are residential uses in those areas as well. So it starts to become a little bit more questionable of, well, how does it really fit and be compatible in those areas? So our recommendation is to move forward with the definition that we have, make it a by right use within the general industrial and the II zoning district, not allow it in any other zoning district in the city. It's just flat out prohibited. So we think that that would simply define probably the general understanding of how we would have applied the code, even though it's silent on the issue, but that's probably how we would have understood that to work. And that's how we recommend to go forward.
Has there been any approaches to the city about putting in either of the data center, a small scale or a hyperscaling data center?
Yeah, we get inquiries from time to time about what's available, how would that fit, where can I do these things? Sure. No one's come forward with an actual plan, but yes, we fielded calls on those questions.
So if I'm reading this right, it would be any data center of any size would just be a minor site development plan.
Correct.
I'm wondering if it wouldn't make sense to have for the minor data centers, the local ones, I think a minor site development plan makes sense. But I'm new here, so I'm verifying what I'm thinking here. But minor site development plans are just staff. They look at them, they approve them. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Major site development plans need to go to the commission and then council.
They do.
So I'm wondering if it wouldn't make sense to have the small data centers do the minor site development plan and major like hyperscaling data centers do a major site development plan, because those are massive infrastructural projects as well. And I think there is benefit to having community input on those. That just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that was exactly kind of what I was thinking for potentially down the line.
Right.
May I?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm thinking along the same lines, wondering if I'm glad that this is being tackled. And I'm going to say two things. One of them is going to seem a little hypocritical because I do have a lot of AI subscriptions. But adding a definition
conflict.
by kilowatt or therms and in the space to determine whether it's a minor site development or a major site plan might make sense. Here's the hypocritical part. I was looking online. It looks like electric utility cost is up for consumers about 25% last 10 years. And data center usage is going to grow from 183 terawatt hours to 426 terawatt hours in the next 5 years. Which is crazy to think about. So is it appropriate to think about incorporating some on-site water reuse or electric generation, because the city provides the utility to all of us. So a data center, while it might provide some jobs, certainly going to raise everybody's electric bill. Unless there's some renewable energy or some consideration to cause them to do things that make sense, that are sustainable and make good sense for the community in terms of reclaiming cooling water, reusing it, and maybe even some solar.
Is
Yeah,
that?
so-
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to play off that a little bit here. So I have some of the same questions, and I know from some experiences I have outside this room, like this kind of some communities where this is becoming an issue, and I think my question is related to Jim's, but it's assuming that we were to move forward with this change in these changes. One of the questions I have is under the, I guess it's a B, 4B, I think there, the part where it says, or diminish the quality or quantity of any utility service presently provided by the city. So no site development plan approval will be issued for any use in the GI district if that is one of the conditions. And I'm just wondering how, I guess, how a large data center would not or could ever meet that definition, I guess. Because with the water use, with the wastewater generation, and with the electricity consumption, I think that would be a non-starter, I guess, for these. And so that's a question I have is, as currently defined, could any data center be built? Or is that sufficiently broad enough that you think at a staff level you could define what that means? It seems like it's a little vague, and I guess that would be a question I have.
Yeah. You're probably reading that more strictly than it's applied. So you're reading on page 3 of the staff report,
Yep.
Right? Subsection B. So no site development. So we're going to quote, this is current code. This isn't proposed code. No site plan approved. I'm going to paraphrase. Approved will be issued for the GI if a determination made by the approving authority exercising judgment it will create a nuisance. The nuisance is a key here. In terms of diminished, not that it uses supply, but it's diminishing and causing a nuisance in the quality of the system, which would mean that you're over polluting your effluent for your sanitary sewer, and we have to then do pre-treat. You need to do pre-treatment on site before it gets to the main treatment site. Your water quality would not have been the consumption of potable water. It would have been runoff from your site into the water system. So I think the way we apply these things is not exactly that you're using capacity up. It's whether the result of you using it is now the outflow from the system is detrimental to the community.
Yeah.
So if you were thinking that, well, I'm using up 2 million gallons a day out of our water plant, that isn't necessarily a criteria here in relation to diminished and nuisance.
Yeah. And that makes sense to me. I think what you'll run into, I get into echo off of what Kyle was saying. I think what we're seeing across the country in the news with some of these is, I think if you try to approve that at the staff level, I guess, as a minor site development plan, that's because that's what we're talking about, right?
Yep. But the standards are the same, whether they're a minor or major. The only difference is that there's hearings.
Right. I just think if you're approving that at a staff level, I think it'd be better to have the public input in terms of the coming before the commission and coming before city council to make some of those decisions, I guess, that way. I just, this has come up in races all over the country as an issue, and local, whole counties, whole states are banning data centers because of strong feelings about them. So right, wrong, or indifferent, I think allowing for more public input in the process, or the ability to have some of that, would be a good thing. So I would kind of be in favor, I think, of an approach similar to what Kyle was describing. But other thoughts?
I think an important note, I just want to bounce it off of what was said over here, Jim, right? Sorry, what Jim said, get the names right. He said they might make jobs, and construction, yeah, there's a lot of construction jobs that come when data centers roll through, but especially the hyperscaler ones, once they're up and running, I think it's like 10, 15 jobs. 10 years ago, the Technology Association of Iowa was really pushing to get data centers in Iowa. They thought that it was going to be a way to get these companies to build campuses and bring people here, and that just I think everyone kind of thought that at the time, and it just never happened. So yeah, the construction jobs are good when they're here, but then they're gone, and then you've got 10 people in a massive facility doing work that is important and does need to be done. But I do think that giving public input is important.
I agree with that, especially as the city continues to annex east of 35 and maybe north. There'll be more opportunity for large-scale developments like this. I think it's important to get this right before that happens, so that you have the right definitions and the right protections for the community.
Just to, I guess, pivot a little bit. I was curious, the definition here, data center means a facility whose primary service is data processing, etc. I assume that primary service phrase gets used in the code a fair amount. How is that actually defined, and like what would there be any concern for,
So what we're not trying to do is, let's say I'm a 20,000 square foot building and I have 10,000 square feet of office and R&D space, and I have data processing in the back of the building for my own purposes. I'm not going to call you a data center. Okay. So that's what the intent of the primary is. Generally, you would say 50% is kind of how we look at what primary is, whatever's 50 plus 1. I don't know exactly how that would work on a floor plan with servers versus people, but that's why it says primary, is that if you are a business that has your own processing area, then you're not going to get captured by this.
And yeah, that's kind of exactly where I was headed with that.
And honestly, that's becoming a thing of the past
Right.
too.
Yeah,
10 years ago, every bank in town had their servers on prem. These days, they're all at one of the small regional data centers like a Light Edge or US Signal.
Yeah, so I think that's so from what I understand, I'm in no way an expert on this, is the distinction between those uses. You could argue one is more economic development than the other.
Yeah.
So the edge processing, the local processing, you could say you're meeting the needs of your local economy.
Yep.
The hyperscalers are never doing that.
Yeah.
So we're not really approaching it from an economic development perspective. We're just trying to regulate the buildings and
Yep.
the externalities of it. But there is definitely a difference, like you just said, of who needs the service.
Yep. No, that's so yeah, the small ones provide what's called co-location. So basically you rent rack space in them, and then you put your servers there. It allows you to keep them geographically separate. We have some at my company in Des Moines and some in Eden Prairie, owned by the same company. It's easy. It works, and they provide a really good service. They provide the physical controls that would be very expensive to maintain in a regular building. Sorry, this is where I live, so it's
That's totally accurate from what I understand too.
To pull on a thread a little bit that Jim mentioned earlier, if we were interested in requiring or dramatically incentivizing data center projects to have like on-site power generation, solar on roofs, things like that, what would be the best way to do that, I guess?
Is that within our scope?
Yeah, that's also a good question.
Well, I mean, you can recommend. I mean, I'm recommending a definition and an approval process. You can recommend whatever you want to recommend. I will just say I don't think you can require solar. If in Iowa, I don't believe we can require solar on anything. So the distinction will be if the property has zoning, I can't negotiate anything outside of the code. If it's ag and you want to be an industrial campus, That's what contract rezoning is, and the council can add reasonable conditions related to the use. So there's a big distinction between those green boxes out east that might be a campus someday, an existing lot and an existing building. I definitely cannot require solar on an existing building. But that's just one thing that you guys have talked about. So there's other things that could be explored.
And another thing that people have mentioned is just making sure that public comment is held up for these types of uses. That could be something that could easily be a part of the review process for something like this, that if any facility that comes this way that meets these expectations is to be reviewed, it goes through these commissions. It doesn't go for minor site plan.
Yeah,
If that's the intent of this commission, that we want to see the public comment portion, that's one way to push it forward. But it still doesn't, again, even if you force public comment for this, you still have a set of standards by which the commission is going to have to, if you approve something in here and you just don't want a data center, for example, then the city has very little legal ground to stand on to deny it.
So I'm gonna listen a little bit more. So there's, you might feel confined by what I've presented because I did not approach it of how many different ways could you regulate it. I just said, here's the simplest way to do it based on how we do everything else in the city. So there's a distinction. Well, there's multiple options. Okay, if you're going to really think about how would you want to permit this and what criteria would you apply, it might not be what is in this report. So there's two other approaches, which I don't have options drafted for you. One is to make it a special use permit. That unfortunately goes to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, not to the Planning Commission or the City Council. It is a public hearing, but you're putting a very large loaded issue in front of a board that's usually looking at churches and variances, not multi-billion-dollar campuses. So I wouldn't want to go that route. The other thing that some cities have done is to create what in our code would be an Article 13, which is called special use standards, but don't get confused. It's not related to special use permits. It's just special standards that apply to some uses. So if there was an extra set of expectations that's outside of the site plan criteria, that would belong in that section. So that would be an option, but we would really want to know what we're talking about in terms of what those extra expectations are, if they're beyond what can be controlled in the site plan review process. Like you can set a size threshold. If it's below 100, it's staff. It's above 100, it goes through a hearing process. No problem. That's easy. If there's other expectations, then it needs to have that Article 13 language added to the code, so it's black and white. About what needs to happen, or at least what considerations would trigger you having to do that. Otherwise, there wouldn't really be authority to say add solar. That just isn't in the code. Forget that I would prohibit it. You just wouldn't have the authority to do it. Just be kind of random.
Sure.
So there's other checks and balances in the system that are beyond this. So granted, we're not the only electric provider in the city, right? So Alliant's going to provide all the electricity to the East Industrial area. There are other Alliant customers in Ames, but Alliant is giant and has customers throughout the Midwest, right? So they're proactively taking a step to invest in infrastructure to serve this use. Ames isn't necessarily doing that. Ames Electric. Our service territory would include the GI area. It just doesn't leap over I-35 into the East Industrial area. So there is a check and balance there that if you're a large electric user, you don't have a right to unlimited power in Ames. Like you can't just walk in and say, I need 20 megawatts, give it to me. 2 years. That doesn't exist. So doesn't mean that the systems, and that's why I put that in the criteria, that if you need a substation or you need a high voltage transmission line to get to your site, you need to disclose that because it could trigger a whole separate review process, but it also needs to be part of the consideration. So that's why I put that in there. The same with water. You aren't necessarily entitled to use all remaining capacity at the water plant. Like that doesn't exist. You can't just have our last 5 million gallons. That just doesn't exist. So there are some checks and balances in there. but I understand also if there is an idea that we need more assurance through the zoning ordinance, that's why the zoning ordinance exists. And the public hearing process can be a venue to investigate those things and sort it out. But I think I need to hear a little bit more from you guys in terms of what your real interests are. And then maybe we talk about what a motion is and how that could be structured. So it's workable for council to understand what you're trying to get to. And if you don't take action tonight, like there's something you want to defer until the next meeting, that's possible. If we can get through it and there is consensus about what works, I'd be happy to have that tonight, so I can go forward. But that's a little bit of extra advice. Now I'll really kind of push it back to you and see what you want to do.
I think that I would definitely like to see, as we were having like the conversation about solar and things, like I'm pro trying to make these things more sustainable, but I also thought that would kill any kind of deal. Like somebody is going to be like, if you say that, that's it, I'm not going here. I'm literally going to go beyond city limits and go build it there. So like, I think that maybe it could be helpful to see some comps of other code or how other large economic development players in Iowa are handling this issue. Also, so we want to be reasonable to make sure that we have, from a zoning perspective, the ability to regulate it, put it where we want, not put the city in a gray area. But we also want to make sure that we're not tying our hands too much from an economic development perspective, I would say, to put too many requirements on there.
So my understanding would be this, that most people are not relying on zoning for any of this. They're relying on the use of financial incentives to say yes or no. So if you're Cedar Rapids, Google and another company want to build a campus, they negotiated 20 years of TIF to be the incentive to come to the city. They didn't use zoning to regulate it in any way whatsoever. And I would say that's way more common. The argument is changing, but the argument in the past is, should you even give incentives, not should you regulate it in another way if they don't want incentives. So within Iowa, I'm pretty confident I'm going to find very little comps about, like, so West Des Moines is a good example. West Des Moines just says it's a permitted use. Assumption in the incentives with Microsoft as they build out the campus. It's not directly a zoning compliance issue. Story County did just adopt themselves some standards that for if someone were to try to site in Story County, they adopted some standards about trying to help guide that decision, which is a zoning tool. I think some counties have been more involved in trying to do that than cities, probably because counties don't provide any utilities and their leverage is very low. So zoning is their best tool. Municipalities, especially Ames, where we're a full service community, we have a couple more tools in the toolbox. So I might be able to do that. I'm just off the top of my head. Other than counties, I don't know of an example where a city's doing that in Iowa.
Got it.
Because yeah, like I think it was Kyle that said, maybe it was Jim. 15 years ago, it was considered economic development. The state of Iowa doesn't consider it economic development, or they're not against it, but you don't get the same kind of tax credits that you would have gotten 20 years ago.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean it's not good for your community with the construction jobs and the tax base it generates. It's just a question of what do you want to do with your resources and your land. So go ahead. Keep discussing. We'll figure out what the...
For me, I think the bare minimum is the delineation between the regional and the hyperscaler data centers and the minor and major site development plans there. I think that should be... that would be something that I would definitely like to see as a change to this language, is if it's a major hyperscaler based on X size or power consumption or water consumption or any of those items, then it goes to a major site development plan, versus if it's just a regional little guy, that's a minor.
Of those options, I would advocate for building size, because I won't be able to do a great job of knowing, especially energy consumption.
Yeah, and those are changing daily. If the new models that Google are coming out with are wildly, so we could say it could be this thing, and then tomorrow AI power consumption would drop by like 90%. So I think building size is the correct thing to do.
It's the easiest to admit. It might not be absolutely perfect, but it's a pretty clear dividing line. Like if you have more than one building,
yeah,
you're going to have way more than one building.
Yeah.
My understanding.
I was just going to ask, so assuming there's some threshold that you would, in a proposed alternative, I guess, would you say like the way it is, the same requirements would apply, just the minor versus the major site development plan requirement changes based on the size? Is that what you're thinking? Or there would be a different, can there be a different set of requirements for
that would require,
or that would be
that gets hard. That's where that Article 13 idea of having additional requirements comes in, but like the permit criteria probably are not different.
Okay.
Because then you go into that special use permit process, which has to go to the zoning board of adjustment. And I can't advocate for that. It just seems beyond their responsibility.
Yeah, I would not. I'm not inclined to take that approach either. I guess just knowing that.
So you could
it's something
add
that should go to
standards.
city council eventually. I think that's the appropriate venue for that.
So you can add standards that are beyond base zoning. That's what that Article 13 discussion is about. It's like, so not apples to apples, but like mini storage. You're allowed to do mini storage in GI with no rules. You want to do mini storage in HOC. There's 2 pages of extra rules in Article 13. The permit's the same.
Right.
You just have different expectations.
That sounds like what we're talking about.
But then you need to define all of your expectations.
I see.
Yeah, because I agree with Kyle that sort of my minimum, I think that especially large data centers should go through a major site development plan. But yeah, within this right now, within the current rules, I don't necessarily see there being a lot of benefit to that. Like it allows people to speak on it, which is good, but all the requirements are still exactly the same. It doesn't, give very much flexibility to hear the public.
And I didn't give you actually all the site plan criteria. I just gave you
that's fair. Yeah.
The nuisance report criteria. So the site plan criteria are actually a little bit different. Well, I shouldn't say they're different. They are the actual criteria versus a requirement to give us information and not be a nuisance. So they're the same things that you would apply to a major site plan, kind of like building massing compatibility, not cause a nuisance from noise or light and dust, and like some of those same kind of factors that are listed in that utility report, like things that would make you incompatible with a residential use would get captured there. Utility consumption would be that language that you brought up, Mike, and how does that get interpreted by a council versus staff?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
I guess for me, like thinking about if there were, an additional section that had additional requirements, what I'm most interested in is things around that utility consumption piece of this.
But are you, I guess I need to understand more about that, because you're not saying it as a threshold of where you get reviewed. You're saying there's an absolute threshold of how much you're allowed to use.
I'm curious if there are communities that have set those types of thresholds. If that's something that has been tried before. I guess for me, at least minimum bar is transparency about those intended uses, intended amounts and things. I know, that can change over time and things. But I don't necessarily think it's crazy to have, a flexible sliding scale that might change over time for utility consumption, depending on the size of the community and, how much capacity City of Ames has, for instance. But yeah, I guess exploration of what regulations exist around utilities requiring transparency, if there are restrictions on utility usage, is what I'm curious about, and if those have been applied.
So I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm personally kind of struggling how
absolutely.
that's a zoning issue,
That's
because
absolutely
that
fair.
sounds like a utility capacity issue.
Yeah.
Versus generally zoning is about property compatibility and general welfare of the community, not
That's a good point.
do you want to dole out your capacity to one person over another. So I'm definitely not saying it hasn't been done. I know exactly what it means in our scheme of zoning to regulate utility consumption. And then do we care more if it's Alliant or Ames Electric? Because it sounds like we care if it's Ames Electric, but maybe not Alliant. And that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of struggle with that, with the electric issue. But again,
That's
I will say what I said was in Iowa. I don't know of anybody that's doing that except for a couple of counties. I know absolutely there's places in Virginia that have regulated the heck out of every data center because they don't like what happened.
Yeah.
Their goal is to not approve any. So I think I can find resources that categorize things differently and added rules. That exists. I know that exists.
So that was a question I had, I guess. So, I think we've got a lot of smart people up here, and we could probably come up with a really well thought out, like really put a lot of effort into making it what we think's best. I'm wondering what the direction is of the city council on this, because the more detailed you make the requirements for this, the less likely it's going to be that one of these ever comes here. And if the goal is to just base level define what this is versus, I guess, what is the direction that we're going for with this?
So council has given no direction. I said I need to write a definition, and I'm going to do that. And they didn't stop me. That's all that in this case. I don't. Many times I'm here with council said to do it,
right,
to do something, maybe specifically this, or to do something. In this case, I said, here's a gap in the code. I got to address it one way or another. And they said, go ahead and go to the commission and move forward. I think I'll give you one way you could do this. Again, I think you could do a lot of different things. It seems like there's consensus to at least have a dividing line between major and minor. You could definitely recommend that. And then which is a clear, let's say it's 100,000 square feet. That's a clear recommendation. Put that threshold in. Then you could also recommend that the council explore adding additional standards if that's the case, or to make it clear that you think it would be worth doing if that's the majority of, I don't know that the majority thinks that, but if the majority thought we should explore that further, then when it gets to council, they would understand that you have some concern about not having any other expectations, but you don't know what those expectations are. Committing a ton of resources to that, I think, would be council's choice, because I didn't plan to use a ton of resources on that. They might have the same. They might have the exact same concerns as the commission because they haven't talked about it before. So I think you have different ways to approach it.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
So I love the initiative. Okay. I love the attitude. They can't stop me.
They didn't stop me. They can't
Yeah,
stop
they
me.
can. So I'm wondering if we could do this tonight, and if this is an option. Could we send it back to you, since you have all the initiative, to come up and propose the square footage number based on some research and bring this back in 2 weeks? It sounds like there's a dividing line requirement and there's a public comment requirement based on that dividing line. And then we could work the Article 13 separately after some research is done, maybe as a separate issue later in the year.
I think we're not going to meet in 2 weeks because I already canceled the meeting. Okay. Sorry. I needed the room for the zoning board of adjustment.
Or could we do it at the next session, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think, I really think, without going super deep, I think 100, if you believe in the edge facilities, the regional facilities, they're going to be bigger. Like Des Moines uses 10,000 square feet. That's basically nothing. So a 10,000, to me, other than that number, no one's using that number. I think the good number is it more or less than $100,000, 100,000 square feet. 100,000 square feet is probably a 10-acre property. So if that gives you a little bit of a sense and what they need to find, in terms of siting these, and the location you can put these is highly restrictive because of the access to electricity. So it's, even though I just showed you all kinds of land that's zoned that way, there's not going to be a ton of facilities. The East Industrial area, the intensive industrial, is different because Alliant is building that substation, and anything along Lincoln Way out there, East Lincoln Way, it would be able to have access to that substation. And theoretically, one or more data center developments could happen out there. But those would likely be the hyperscale type of things, because those properties are way over. Those properties are 40 acres plus. So no one's buying 40 acres and just putting one building on it. So without getting a whole lot deeper, I think 100,000 is a reasonable number. I know 10 is not the right number, but I'm not sure where I would come up with 40 or 50 or 80 as a number either.
So some of these could be stacked next to each other. Different companies could be stacked together on the same 40-acre block or plot or whatever. So, you know, is there, this could be an Article 13 thing, I suppose, about proximity to an adjacent center, so that you don't end up with 4 centers that are essentially one massive center as a nuisance to a neighborhood, or to a nuisance as a nuisance to future development. I think these are important things to think about, but separately.
So, and I think you could bifurcate the process and spend more time investigating if extra standards are appropriate, and you could immediately adopt the definition and a 2-tier system for review, and then recommend that council direct staff to explore additional standards to address. If you could articulate those issues, that'd be super helpful. I know you don't, I'm not looking at Jim, but I mean, if anybody has an idea of an issue, it's good for council to know what you're thinking when you're making like a general recommendation.
So just a suggestion. You mentioned Virginia. I'm aware that they have issues. If we just pulled some of their codes and circulated, and everybody circled kind of what they agreed with or crossed out what they didn't agree with, and gave it back to you as, hey, here's a template. Would that work for you to maybe develop some language? And of course, it has to be consistent with state law and other things, but could we look at some of the most restrictive covenants and then start narrowing it down?
Is that where we want to start from? Is the most restrictive?
Yeah, those are all basically meant for moratorium, is what they're designing now.
Yeah, Virginia's are basically like, we're doing everything in our power where you don't even bring us a data center anymore, as I understand it.
In Loudoun County, that's true. But so here's my issue, which is not your issue, so you can disregard what I'm saying. I do not have resources of time to do that task in the next 3 months. I will be down 2 staff members. I have other priorities that council has given to me. So like a thorough research, working with different ideas and stuff like that. It's not something that's going to happen in the next couple months. So that,
Thinking maybe 6 months from now, we come back to this.
and that's fine. So that's where I would say, if that's the timeline you're on, then that's where I think you recommend that council ask for that to be put into the work plan, or to be a follow-up item to the change. I don't want to wait 6 months to adopt a definition. That my selfishness here is, I want a definition of some type.
Yeah.
I agree. We get the definition done now, but we get the other things done later.
And that could work.
I think the definition and the 2-tier system tonight is, I think we should absolutely do that. I'm thinking about like the technological steps of like any sort of section 13 though, and I'm struggling to get to any point that would make sense.
I think what Jim said I didn't bring you any ideas, so you don't even know what the world of possibility is.
Sure.
So I wouldn't expect you to imagine tonight how to do it. So if there is an interest in exploring that, I think Jim's right. We will find resources. There's other resources out there. I was just not asked to do that at this point. So that's why you didn't get that information.
I think I'm in agreement with the changing the definition, as we've been discussing the threshold tonight. I guess the bigger discussion about 3 to 6 months from now, like looking into Article 13, requirement, I guess I would be interested in getting some direction from council before we go on doing that endeavor. Like, what do they want us to look at that? Like, I don't want to put a bunch of work into something that's just not there's no interest in doing. I guess that would be I would be interested in knowing.
So that's why I would say make 2 motions.
Yeah.
And they might say, I like it, but I already told Kelly to do these other 6 things.
Yeah,
So
right.
we can't do that right now. But
And
when
then
you
we
do the
don't have
zoning
it.
code update, why don't you roll it into that, which is something that'll happen the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So that, I would say do 2 motions. It's very clear there's an obvious thing that you're interested in, and there might be something else you're interested in.
One caveat to that, we obviously, data centers are hot right now. You're getting inquiries right now. If a data center comes to you after council would approve what you're working on right now, then that puts us in a gray area that we don't have any standards that we're.
Well, you'll
I
have,
don't have the
I
additional.
mean, you don't
The
have
additional
extra
standards, okay.
standards.
Okay.
They'll have to fit within the normal box.
Okay.
And I don't, again, I'm not sure exactly what the extra standards would be off the top of my head. So it's worth looking at other, right? The main concerns are utilities, noise, use of land without jobs. Like some of those things you can't regulate in zoning whether they have jobs or not. If you allow the use, you allow the use. You don't require jobs with uses. But there might be some other things that are a little bit more involved than what we're talking about superficially tonight.
Water table degradation has been another big one that we've seen in some.
That's going to be highly dependent on the source of water.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like, so we have no concerns in Ames about the aquifer because of where we get our water from. It's not a problem. We might not have a water treatment plant that can give you unlimited water.
Sure.
But we're confident in our source of water.
Okay.
There
cool.
are ways, maybe this is along the lines of the solar comment that it would make a project infeasible, but like just this fluffy article mentions there's like recirculation concepts that communities can require to do a recirculation instead of just like, I mean, there's certain like standards that a community could say, look, you can't pump more than X amount. And in order to get to that, we're not saying your project is, you can't build it here. We're saying design it another way for this community. Like that's one. League of Cities, check it out. Most recent pub.
And to me, that's why the direction is important, because if the direction is we want a data center here, then I think it's a much different discussion than we want to. If we're going to do this, we want to do it absolutely right, versus we don't want one here and we want to make it difficult to have one here. Like those are 3 completely different directions and would influence, like if you're coming up with Article 13 additional requirements, like what those would look like. So
I agree with you. The direction, basically council step in and how do you want to direct staff to handle this? What's your lay? Yeah.
All right. So I think we're all in agreement then.
Yeah.
On this basically.
Yeah.
So 2 motions. The first one, the 2-tier system, major, minor site plan, and the second one, basically asking for council to give some guidance on their thought process for data centers going forward.
Does that give you enough direction, Kelly?
Yeah, I just need a number. Is it 50,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet? I'm just not adding your 10.
I think 100,000 seems fair.
Okay, so in that scenario, so if there's a hearing process, would you want to allow any other zones to have the use through the major site plan? So PI would be the one that you would look at. In addition, if there's a hearing process now to evaluate.
Yeah. I don't think so. I think honestly, if a hyperscaler data center wants to come in, they're going to want to be in the II zone, I think anyways.
Well, it's the regional ones, the smaller ones. So right now they're not allowed at all at PI.
Sure.
So if you had a 60,000 square foot facility, you can't go in PI.
which colors are GI and II? Or I guess the 2 are the ones we're talking about.
So the better way to look at it is you can tell the colors apart.
I can't read the letters is what it is.
Yeah, 3 different shades.
Probably
of gray.
so the description.
GI is this light gray here.
Okay.
II is this dark gray, PI is this medium gray, and RI is this.
I don't know why I can tell that.
You'll never be able to tell that on here ever.
So all the gray.
I can see that.
Yeah. So
That's my
PI.
job.
So PI was created in 2000 to replace the GI. But then when we did Plan 2040, we kind of left that concept behind and we created II, which is a total departure from PI. So PI only exists where Barilla is, where Color Biotics has a facility here, and then down by the research park. So PI is not a common zone in the city.
The darker gray in the Alliant area, that's II.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I wonder if we could, if Kyle would accept as part of this, a friendly amendment just to.
Well, I haven't made a motion yet, so
Okay.
we're still in discussion.
All right, let's discuss.
And I think technically I have to open and close public comment. Too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, two.
We've been having such a good
This is not a hearing, so you didn't have.
Oh, it's not. Okay, good. Okay.
I don't care.
Never mind.
So go ahead.
Yeah,
What were you-
I'm just going to make a suggestion. Maybe data centers only belong in II. Maybe they don't, maybe majors only belong in II.
Yeah,
So
that,
majors-
I agree
majors
with
is,
that.
I think
I
the
agree
issue
with
is-
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if majors maybe, but if that was the answer for the smaller ones, the answer will be no, because Alliant doesn't want to sell 10-acre parcels to people. They want to sell 300-acre sites to people. So so you're saying, okay, so two-tier system, but even in the two-tier system, Jim is suggesting that the major site plan allowance for it, or the option to even do it, is only an II. GI has to be a site that is no more than 100,000 square feet. Okay.
And honestly, like I don't think that'll be a problem at all because I don't foresee like a hyperscaler data center trying to go into the GI space.
It's not. I don't think that. I mean, there isn't really that land unless
Yeah.
3M, Danfoss, or
And they have to
Americo
purchase
leaves,
Yeah.
and they get repurposed.
Yeah, no, I think that's a totally fair.
Yeah, I agree.
Never hurts.
Yep.
Okay, now we need a
So-
motion.
Okay.
We have that
So-
motion. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna wing this, but
Oh wait, one more question. Do
Oh.
you want this also to include the changes that you suggested here? I guess
That's all alternative one. The alternative
Right.
one is everything that I wrote.
So I guess would you prefer that we include those changes into this motion? I guess
The way I would understand what you're saying is alternative one with the
with that
addition
stuff.
yeah.
of a 100,000 square foot threshold for permitting, and to exclude facilities over 100,000 square feet in any zone that's not II.
Kelly, you should just make the motion.
That's what I understand.
I move that. Is that legal?
Yes.
Council does it all the time.
Cool. I second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second for Kyle's motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Do we have a second motion?
Yes. I would move that the commission request further guidance from council on the city's long-term plan for data centers.
Wouldn't
In
be a
effect-
plan. You mean to evaluate? You're talking about standards, not a plan. Like we're not gonna have an economic development plan about data centers.
Sure. So
Changes to Article 13.
You're talking about
Data
zoning,
center?
zoning
Yeah.
standards, not
Yeah.
a plan. Yeah.
because well, I guess my thought was if they're wanting to attract data centers, then our standards we look for probably change a little bit, as opposed to if they don't want to attract data centers, our standards change a little bit. That was my thought process, was we can utilize the standards to cudgel a little bit if we need to, but
Does that work for a motion?
Say it again.
Any more
I'm not-
specificity on that?
I'm not saying this one.
I guess what I was thinking a little more specificity, like just, I guess I would suggest motion for council to provide direction on standards for data centers and specifically what priorities they have in the standards or things that we should address, I guess. And if they want us to do that, I guess would be more along those lines, I guess.
Or if we were to just recommend to council that they direct staff to investigate the feasibility of expanding Article 13 to cover the standards around the development of data centers.
Second.
Okay.
Do that one.
Yeah,
That
I
was
think that's well
simple.
said.
Yeah.
We've got a motion and a second. All in favor of Jim's motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right.
All right. The next item is your bylaws. The group that was here at the last meeting read the draft language, wanted to be on the agenda for approval. So tonight, looking for a motion to approve the changes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second for approval of the amendments to the bylaws. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, we'll go to commission comments. Does anyone have any further comments?
Great job tonight, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do enjoy
Good discussion.
these
Yeah.
sorts of meetings.
Yeah. All right, any staff comments?
Just two about meetings. I already told you the next meeting has been canceled. We do expect to meet here on July 1st. If any of you, that's a Wednesday,
Oh, okay.
because you always meet on Wednesday. July 4th, Saturday, just so you know. If we're not going to have quorum, I need to know that much sooner than later.
I will be in South Dakota on July 1st.
I will be coming back from Norway.
So not here on July 1st.
I will
That's
likely
further
not be here.
Oh, boy.
It's possible I'll be coming back from a Hyman
But,
on that day.
Okay.
He has the
Processing
best
that.
one.
Yeah,
it's
it does.
possible you'll be
He
on your
has
way
the
home
best
from
one.
I
Honeymoon.
was just thinking.
Well, I don't know exactly what our timeline
Norway
is for
was a
travel
good
that
shot,
day,
but-
but
1, 2, 3. That
It's a
leaves
month away.
maybe 4.
I should be here. We won't be, you're correct that we won't be traveling that early.
I, if it makes a quorum, I can speed on my way back from Minneapolis.
You can also just pull over and call in
You could call it.
if you wanted to.
Ooh.
So anybody that's gone, you have the option of always calling in. That's available to everybody. And usually, if we are short on quorum, you'll see Eileen contact you and say, "Will you call in?" So okay, well, that's good to know. I will chew on that with what the reason I'm thinking is I think there's an item that really wants or needs to go July 1st in terms of schedule. I'll revisit that to see what that looks like.
I'll be here for that night.
I also have no plans to leave as of right now.
I would likely be able to find a way to call in if I needed to. So
Okay. All right. Well, it's good to know. And then
Is it the apartments out here or what's the item? I'm just curious.
I think it's the preliminary plat on Tabor,
Oh, okay.
I believe. There might be others as well, but that one I know comes to mind. I know it's sitting waiting for a meeting. Okay, my second item is a good conversation on the rezone. I feel like good comments, and if you want, at some point we can kind of, especially since we have some newer commissioners, we can talk about the housing philosophy of the comp plan a little bit. Like I alluded to, there's not great guidance on apartments or not. There's probably more, I would say, in general when it's not about a specific project. If you want to have just a general conversation about it at some point, we can do that on a meeting. So that's kind of a thing. Like if you feel like there's an issue out there, they don't feel like you get enough exposure to or information, and it's a general kind of comp plan issue, you can ask to put that on agenda. I just need warning, and you can say, can we put this on an upcoming agenda? And then you guys can talk about something that's not a project and talk about policies or goals and understand maybe what that means. So that's always available to you. I think we've done that once or twice in the last 5 years. Usually it's because you're preparing for something that might be a zoning ordinance change or some kind of policy change, but you can do that for anything as a refresher or just wondering how that would still apply. We don't really, so to Kyle's comment, we don't really publish a report about vacancy in the city, permits. I know these things, but we don't just like publish any kind of particular report. They can just give you a quick snapshot of trends in the city. So I do generally know those things, but it's just not something that we just have out there where I get to share with you and just say, here it is. Just remember this.
Occupancy is different.
It's definitely different. Absolutely, the occupancy rate in the city is under 5%, which indicates strong demand for rental product. And like my pat answer is, we need everything. So you'll never hear me say we don't need one of anything.
Sure.
So you'll rarely hear me say we don't need apartments. I might say I don't know if it's the right place for apartments. I'm never going to say we don't need them.
Sure. Okay, cool.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. All right. With that, do we have an motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Adjourned.
Planning and Zoning Commission credits. City of Ames.